Hello everyone, today we explore one of America's most chilling and unsolved mysteries, the Villisca Axe Murders. On the night of June 9, 1912, in the small town of Villisca, Iowa, tragedy struck a quiet household in the most brutal way imaginable. 8 people, 6 members of the Moore family and 2 young guests, were found dead, all murdered with an axe while they slept. The case shocked the nation, baffled investigators, and remains a source of fear and fascination over a century later. The Moore family was well respected in Villisca. Josiah Moore, the father, was a devoted husband, a community leader, and the owner of a local mercantile business. His wife, Sarah Moore, was known for her kindness and hospitality. Their children, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul, were bright, cheerful, and full of life. That night, 2 young friends, In and Lena Stillinger, were staying over for a sleepover. By all accounts, the evening had begun like any other, with laughter, games, and bedtime stories. But in the dead of night, a horror struck that would leave the town and the nation in shock. Someone entered the Moore home, methodically and silently, and murdered all 8 individuals in their sleep with an axe. The killings were carried out in the Moore family's home at 508 East 2nd Street. Investigators later noted that the killer had meticulously covered mirrors, extinguished lights, and seemed to move with terrifying calm. There were no signs of forced entry, no apparent motive, and no witnesses. The discovery of the bodies was horrifying. On June 10, neighbors visited the Moore home after noticing the family had not been seen all morning. The front door was locked from the inside, but eventually entry was gained, revealing the gruesome scene. Sarah Moore and her daughter, Catherine, were found in the same room, victims of repeated blows to the head. Josiah and his son Herman were discovered in the living room, also brutally attacked. The 2 young guests were found in another room, their tiny bodies bearing the same horrifying injuries. The youngest children, Boyd and Paul, were found in their beds, innocent victims of an incomprehensible crime. The sheer brutality and meticulous nature of the murders sent shockwaves through Villisca. How could one person, or multiple people, commit such violence and leave without a trace? What motive could exist for such an atrocity? Was it revenge, madness, or something far stranger? These questions haunted the town and the nation for decades. The initial investigation by local police, assisted by the Iowa State Patrol, revealed some puzzling details. Footprints in the house suggested the killer wore gloves, and in some rooms, there were clear signs of movement across the floor. Windows and doors were locked, and the family's possessions were untouched, ruling out robbery as a motive. Notes, letters, and personal effects were left behind, further deepening the mystery. Over the years, numerous suspects emerged. One early suspect was Reverend George Kelly, a man with a troubled past and a history of mental instability who had moved to the area around the time of the murders. His erratic behavior and proximity made him a focus of suspicion, though no conclusive evidence linked him to the crime. He was eventually arrested, but later released due to lack of proof. Another suspect was William Mansfield, a traveling businessman with connections to the area. Investigators noted that he had a criminal record and had been in Iowa at the time of the murders. Yet, as with many suspects, evidence was circumstantial, and no charges were filed. Over time, the list of potential killers grew longer, from neighbors and family friends to wandering vagrants, but the case remained unsolved. What made the Villisca Axe Murders particularly chilling was not just the brutality, but the eerie calm and methodical nature of the crime. Mirrors in the house had been covered, suggesting the killer did not want to see their reflection. The bodies were left in their positions, untouched beyond the murders themselves. It was as if the murderer wanted the scene to be discovered exactly as it was. The case drew national attention. Newspapers across the United States reported the murders in sensational detail, adding to the horror and mystery. Headlines spoke of the axe murder horror and Villisca's bloody night, capturing the imagination and fear of a nation. The murders were the subject of public outrage and speculation, as people wondered whether such evil could exist in a small, quiet town. Despite the best efforts of law enforcement, the murders were never solved. Trials, arrests, and investigations failed to produce a conviction. Over time, the case became the stuff of legend, with stories of hauntings, restless spirits, and supernatural explanations emerging alongside historical speculation. Some locals claimed the Moore house was cursed, with strange noises and ghostly apparitions reported long after the murders. The Villisca Axe Murders remain a stark reminder that not all crimes are solved, and that evil can strike without warning, motive, or explanation. The combination of brutality, precision, and mystery has kept the story alive for over a century, inspiring books, documentaries, and countless theories about who committed the crime and why. The Villisca Axe Murders left the town of Villisca, Iowa, in shock, and the investigation quickly became a national obsession. As the police combed through evidence, multiple suspects were considered, each with motives that ranged from revenge to mental instability. One of the earliest suspects, Reverend George Kelly, had a history of instability and a violent streak. He had recently arrived in the area and was known for odd behavior. Some witnesses claimed he had made threatening comments prior to the murders. However, despite his suspicious nature, investigators could not conclusively link him to the crime. He was eventually tried for another crime, but the Axe Murders remained unsolved. Another suspect was William Mansfield, a traveling salesman with a criminal past. Some theorists believe he had reasons to target the Moore family, possibly connected to business disputes or personal grudges. Still, his alibi and lack of concrete evidence prevented any charges from being filed. Over the decades, other suspects emerged, including former employees, neighbors, and even traveling vagrants, but none could be definitively tied to the murders. Some investigators considered the possibility of a serial killer. The brutality and precision of the murders, killing the victims in their sleep, covering mirrors, leaving no obvious trace, suggested someone methodical and cold-blooded. Unlike random acts of violence, this crime had a calculated nature, which led many to believe it was the work of a single person who carefully planned the attack. Yet the motive remained a mystery, and the killer's identity was never revealed. The physical evidence at the crime scene added to the confusion. Footprints were found leading into the house, but strangely disappeared afterward, suggesting the murderer may have worn shoes designed to leave minimal traces or carefully retraced steps. The murder weapon, an axe, belonged to the Moore household. This raised the possibility that the killer was familiar with the house, or had intended to make it appear as if someone else committed the crime. Over the years, paranormal theories began to surround the Moore house. Some locals claimed that the house was haunted by the spirits of the Moore family, who were believed to still roam the rooms where they were killed. People reported strange noises, shadows, and cold spots. Paranormal enthusiasts often visit Villisca, conducting ghost tours and investigations, keeping the memory of that horrifying night alive. Books, documentaries, and podcasts have revisited the case countless times. Historians and true crime experts analyze the events, offering new theories with each generation. One theory suggests that a family friend or relative, angered by a personal slight, may have committed the murders and fled the scene before discovery. Another theory proposes that a stranger, perhaps mentally unstable, could have chosen the Moore home randomly but executed the crime with precision. The Villisca Axe Murders also provide a window into early 20th century small-town America. Law enforcement in 1912 lacked the forensic tools and technology available today. Fingerprinting was in its infancy, and crime scene preservation was rudimentary. Modern investigators often wonder if today's techniques, including DNA analysis, might finally solve the case. Yet as the years passed, physical evidence deteriorated or was lost, making modern resolution nearly impossible. Despite the lack of resolution, the tragedy of that night remains real. 8 innocent lives were lost, and the shockwaves of the crime rippled through the community. Families mourned, the town lived in fear, and the case became a chilling cautionary tale of how evil can strike anywhere, at any time. Even today, the Moore house stands as a symbol of this dark event. Restored and preserved, it serves as a museum and haunted attraction. Visitors come from around the world to learn the story, walk the floors where the victims fell, and reflect on a crime that may never be solved. The house is a reminder that history is not only about victories and discoveries, but also about mysteries and tragedies that defy explanation. The Villisca Axe Murders continue to inspire curiosity, fear, and fascination. For true crime enthusiasts, it is a puzzle that challenges the mind, offering endless possibilities but no definitive answers. For locals and descendants of the victims, it is a solemn memory, a story of loss that shapes the community's history. Ultimately, the case serves as a stark reminder of the unpredictability of human nature. Evil can manifest in ways that are meticulous, horrifying, and ultimately inexplicable. While we may never know who wielded the axe that fateful night in Villisca, the story of the Moore family and their tragic end will remain etched in history. It is a story of innocence lost, of questions that remain unanswered, and of a mystery that continues to grip the imagination over a century later. As we reflect on the Villisca Axe Murders, we are reminded that not all mysteries are solved, and not all stories have closure. The past leaves its mark, and some shadows linger, waiting to be uncovered. The house, the town, and the memories of that terrible night continue to whisper the story of 8 lives cut short, a mystery unsolved, and a darkness that still fascinates and terrifies.